Daniel Ricciardo's shocking comeback on the grid didn't come without its own plan, and according to all things, he's hinting at a comeback with Red Bull. The fact that he's been loaned to AlphaTauri and him saying that he's happy to be back with Red Bull and not the Italian squad goes to show there is a bigger target behind his signing with the sister team of Red Bull. However, that might be compromised by the Austrian team wanting to build a super squad from 2025 onwards, with Norris and Leclerc emerging from the dark as the top candidates to sign with Red Bull once they're free agents. Ricciardo's mission might take a dark turn, one that could force him to retire with the squad he wasn't originally anticipating. So how could Ricciardo make his mission successful? And what's truly behind his comeback with the worst team on the grid? AlphaTauri, more precisely Red Bull, have decided to get rid of Nyck de Vries after just 10 races in the 2023 season. And although they have justified their move by Nyck not delivering nearly the same performance that they had expected him to, it's safe to say that the impatience from Red Bull has resurfaced all over again. What seems to be a blessing for Ricciardo could turn out to be a curse for his career as well, because for all we know, he could be in the same place as de Vries if the time in AlphaTauri doesn't prove to be a prolific and fruitful one. Obviously, Ricciardo was brought to AlphaTauri for one major reason: building the team's morale and lifting up its value, mostly because they're definitely the worst team on the grid right now, with only 2 points to their name earned by Yuki Tsunoda. If Ricciardo proves that the AT04 is good enough to constantly score points, then its value would be increased by a lot, and he'd be given the opportunity to sign a contract with Red Bull as early as 2024, when the Austrian team could pull the same move on Perez as Racing Point back in 2020 and buy him out of his contract. This, however, might not see the daylight if Perez starts to perform well in the next 12 races, but considering his recent slump of form and how Red Bull have moved forward with Ricciardo's contractual situation and are preparing him for that number 2 seat, I highly doubt that the Mexican driver has what it takes in order to salvage his career at this point. And with the times that Ricciardo set during the Silverstone tyre test on 3 different compounds of tyres, it's safe to assume that he still hasn't lost it, and according to Horner, would be good enough to be constantly on the front row. But this is the RB19 we're talking about, and the call that Horner made to Marco was about the AT04, and these two cars differ in a massive way. One is the best car out there, while the other is the worst and is barely capable of scoring points. Furthermore, as paradoxical as it sounds, Ricciardo would have to beat Tsunoda, who has finally found his groove in his 3rd year with the team and seems to be the only rookie to survive the harsh environment that prevails in these two teams. But according to Ted Kravitz, the goal ahead of Ricciardo is clear: outperform Tsunoda, bring AlphaTauri back to the midfield in the remainder of the 12 races or potentially in 2024, and then sign a contract with Red Bull that would see you retire with the Austrian squad. That could be seen from Ricciardo's statements made in the media, and when talking about this matter, Kravitz went on to say, "It's all well and good basing it on the RB19, which is the class of the field, but he's not driving that car. He's driving probably one of the slowest cars on the grid, if not the slowest, which is the AlphaTauri. The AlphaTauri had some upgrades at Silverstone, and they finished further down than they normally do with a non-upgraded car. This is not a great AlphaTauri, it's fair to say." That quote from Ricciardo I thought was odd. He said, "I'm stoked to be back on track with the Red Bull family." He can't even bring himself to say AlphaTauri. He doesn't want to say "I'm delighted to drive the AlphaTauri" because it's not a quick car. Maybe there's some longer term gain in it for Ricciardo, because there might well be some short term pain if he can't do any better than de Vries. Well, it was more than obvious that Ricciardo wasn't looking to race in an F1 team for whatever it takes, as he had that opportunity last year. However, now that he'll be given the chance to prove himself in one of the worst cars in F1, he'll definitely give it all to make a compelling case for that 2nd seat in Red Bull. The problem is, the team might have shifted their philosophy, and thanks to the new leadership of Oliver Mintzlaff, the Austrian squad is looking to build a super team that will consist of 2 very competitive drivers, as they're likely going to drop the one-man philosophy and adopt a new system of functioning. Yes, it does raise a couple of questions when you say it out loud like this, because why would Red Bull want to jeopardize everything they have right now and put Verstappen in a situation in which he would have to fight for his own championships, rather than them being granted to him by having a secured number 2 driver. Obviously, Red Bull is a company that's promoting its brand from the inside. So if they're able to bring another driver who will raise the competitiveness in the team with Verstappen along the way, then rest assured that this is what the team is going to do. It's a new leadership and a new mentality, one that's looking to take more freedom out of Helmut Marko's hand. And the fact that De Vries was sacked immediately after Ricciardo showed those great lap times in Silverstone speaks volumes about where this whole thing is headed. Even if Ricciardo's first chance to sign with Red Bull were presented to him during the 2025 season, I highly doubt that Red Bull would resist signing Leclerc or Norris once both of them are out of their contracts, or potentially pursue them into a buyout and have Norris drive for the team in the 2025 campaign. Ricciardo retiring with Red Bull is not that far-fetched of a scenario, but after everything that's been evolving in the past couple of days, it's safe to assume that he's not in the long-term plans of the team, because if he is, then he would have to be challenging Verstappen constantly for the championship, and frankly, I don't see that happening. If there is anyone out there that could bring Verstappen down in the same machinery, it has to be Norris or Leclerc, and these two drivers are not in the best of positions in their respective teams. Yes, McLaren did bring massive upgrades to the car, and in Silverstone they were very close to a double podium finish. But Norris himself said that the performance was more of a track-specific one, and he expects the struggles to continue further down the road, which then again point toward one clear scenario. You can't win a championship with McLaren during this era, but you might as well try with Red Bull. After all, Helmut Marko has spoken positive words about Lando Norris and did say that so far he's one of the best friends that Verstappen has on the grid, and in terms of having a young driver in the team, Norris fits the narrative the best. Leclerc has constantly said that he's happy with Ferrari and wants to make it work with the team, but serious negotiations have never been held between these two sides, and it's only been chit-chat, as Leclerc labelled them. This is one of the reasons why Red Bull approached Leclerc at the end of May, just so that they'd have a clear understanding whether he would be in a position to sign a contract and replace Perez after the 2024 season, a response they never announced publicly. One thing is for sure, the hottest seat in F1 is currently courtesy of Sergio Perez, and the Mexican driver is not happy with how things are currently working out between him and the Austrian team. He's announced that he could care less about the ongoing changes in AlphaTauri and the talks about him being replaced. But the truth is, all of the changes that are ongoing right now are because of his bad performance and the need to have a competitive second driver ahead. If there is one thing that Red Bull has drastically changed with the new ownership, it's the strategy of the team and the philosophy of how the drivers will operate, which is why Ricciardo's real plan behind his signature with AlphaTauri might see a roadblock, one that would be much harder to cross compared to De Vries' poor F1 debut.